Hey y'all, happy Sunday and welcome to this week's live Q&A session. This is the portion of the show where we allow YouTube to send out notifications that we're going live. If you're watching this live Q&A on replay, please scrub ahead until this graphic disappears and the actual show begins. If you're watching live and you have any comments or questions, please go ahead and put them in the live chat. But for now, grab a beverage, sit back, and relax while the countdown timer does its thing. Then we'll get started. There it is. Hey, happy Monday, y'all. Still getting used to the new streaming platform. And I thought I had turned that off. Turns out I didn't. So here I am. Welcome aboard. Welcome to another Sunday live Q&A. I'm going to attempt to do a open Q&A. I'm going to do my best, but again, um, what's going on is with the shingles that I have affecting the nerve that starts back at my spine, runs along the shoulder, and down my right arm. I have control of my right hand, but it still does things whatever it wants to do when it wants to do it. So left clicking is fairly reliable. Right clicking is close your eyes and hope for the best, because sometimes it'll right click when it wants to right click, and I'm just powerless to do anything about it. But we'll try to get through. Okay. So before we do anything, what I would like to do is give a shout out to my buddy Steve over at Harneil Media. I sing Steve's praises every weekend here on the Sunday lives, and I'm going to continue to do so until he tells me to knock it off. Basically, if you are even toying with the idea of a website, maybe you think it's time, and you really need to look into it because you're tired of commissions or listing fees, or you're tired of your competition being advertised on the same page you're being advertised on, then do yourself a favor and reach out to Harneil Media. Click the contact us link on his website and shoot him a message. He's more than a patient guy. He will talk to you and see what direction you want to go. Do you want a blog type of website? Do you want a business type of website with that maybe doesn't have scheduled posts, weekly, monthly, whatever, but you're looking for a web store? You want to put up a web store where you can list your products and services to the public at large without any commissions, without any listing fees, and without advertising your competition on the same page. He's more than competitively priced. You'll wonder how he gets away with charging so little once you've sampled his services. And speaking of his services, they're 100% personal. When you're dealing with Harneil Media, you are dealing with Steve. You're not dealing with some nameless, faceless person in a call center somewhere that you will never have contact with again. So, again, I can't stress it enough. Do yourself a favor. Get over to Harneil Media. There's a link to Harneil Media down in the description of every video and live stream on this channel. And it's that way for a reason. Do yourself a favor. Get over there, reach out to Steve, and have a chat with him. He'll take care of you. Thank you, Steve, for everything you do. I greatly appreciate it more than you'll ever know. Hey, this is going to be an open Q&A, meaning that you can ask me any question you would like. Um, they, like I said, I will try to muddle through and get this done, but I need questions to answer simply because, you know, without it, I'll be sitting here tap dancing forever. So, let's see here. We have a question from, I hope I don't butcher your name, Nigel. Nigel Mangru. Is it possible to modify a Z depth on a loaded G code in Mach 3? It is possible, if you have, if you, so long as it's not running. If it's running, you can. There's nothing you can do. But if it's you're not actually running, there is a G-code editor built into Mach 3. Basically, you'll click on edit the G-code within the, I believe it's in the program run tab. It's been a while since I've used Mach 3. And you will have to manually go back in and find all those Z heights and adjust them. When it comes to that, it's usually better just to go back and change your cutting depth and generate new G code. You can cheat the system by and but it's dangerous to do, especially at that depth. I don't know that I would do it at that depth. Um, what I have done is if I know I want to cut a certain amount deeper than the G code says, I will let it zero or let it go to a known height. For instance, set it up to, I don't know if you're working in imperial or metric, but let's say 1 inch or 25 millimeters, whatever. And then tell it, get into Mach 3. You can type into that. You can click on the DRO and the Z height, and you can change that and tell it it's actually sitting higher than it is. Then it will cut deeper. The problem with that is that affects the Z0 for everything. So generally speaking, I would suggest it's better in the long run to go back into your CAD CAM software, make those changes, and generate new G code. It's probably faster too. In my experience, redoing it is easier than trying to find a workaround. It's easier and faster. So, just my opinion. I could be wrong, but you know, yeah. Butch Miller says, in my experience, if I try to cheat the system, I screw up 4 other things. Depends on what you're doing, but yes, the oops, didn't mean to turn that on. The potential is there, so I try to avoid it. All right, let me get over here and see if I missed any question. Butch, I don't know what kind of tap dancing you've been to or doing, but I've not seen tap dancers in a tutu. Those are generally reserved for ballet dancers. The more you know, just trying to help a brother out. Let's see here. I'm going back to look and see if I've missed any questions. I've got a couple of others here. I don't want to make sure I get these. I'm working with this new system, and it's kind of strange. All right. So let me go down here to the bottom, and we'll check for some more. Alan Williamson, Howlin' Wolf. Howlin' Holler. How do I delete unwanted nodes from a half circle with a straight bottom? There are a lot of them. Okay. There are a couple of ways you can do this, Alan. Let me set something up here, and we'll jump into Aspire. And I'm going to, let's see, I'll draw a line and I'll add a bunch of nodes here just to demonstrate my point. You're going to have to imagine that there is a half circle here as well, okay? Now, what you can do is you can select that vector, tap the letter N on your keyboard to go into node editing, and you will see all of those nodes, all right? You can do a box select around the nodes you want to delete, and you see they turned red. Then you can come up, put your cursor over one of them, delete point. Nope, it didn't do it. There's a way you can box delete all of the points. See? Yes, there it is. All right. Control Z, Control Z. All right. Select the vector, do a box select around all those nodes you want to delete, then just tap the letter D on your keyboard, and it deletes all those nodes. So, very, very simple, but very effective. Along those lines, let me Control Z that. We'll go back and we'll select. The ability to box select multiple nodes comes in real handy if you're wanting to move certain things. For instance, if I need to move these two down a little bit, I'm using my cursor down key. I can move those down. I don't have to do them one at a time, and I know that they're going to stay in line with one another. Me Control Z until that's no longer done. Also, what you can do, I'm going to box select these two. I'm going to tap the letter B on my keyboard, and I've just changed those two nodes into Bezier. I've just changed this into Bezier curves. We can see a handle here and a handle here. Control Z to undo those two changes. I can also box select those two handles and move them both down or up at the same rate. So you can box select multiple nodes and multiple control handles when you're working in the node editing mode. But the easiest way, again, to delete multiple nodes, box select them all, tap the letter D. Yep, it missed one. Why are you not deleting? Sometimes they get, there we go. Sometimes they get a little bit picky. So, hope that answered your question, Alan. And thank you for the question. Let's see here. Do we have any new ones coming in? Whoops. 8 Center says D doesn't always seem to work on all types of nodes. If you have smooth node turned on, it might not work. You might have to select, right-click that node and click on smooth node to uncheck it. But yeah, generally speaking, something special is going on with that particular node that it doesn't want to delete. And you may have to put your cursor over it and right-click it and then delete it that way. Let me bring this back here, and I'm going to go ahead and add an arc to it. I'm going to go through 3 points. There's point 1, point 2, then I'm going to bring it up, and there we go. Close, and I'm going to join these so that we have a closed vector. Join, close. I'm setting this up to show you something else. And I'm going to insert a point here, 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 and here. So I've got a bunch of nodes there that I don't need. Now, another thing that I can do, I don't like to do this. Oh, yes, there's Ellen has an excellent point. Getting back to your point, 8 center. Um, Sometimes you think you're clicking on a node and it's the handle. There are some instances where if you zoom in, and I mean you got to zoom in real close, you'll see that there's a handle just slightly offset. So you're not actually selecting the node. You're selecting the handle. And to turn off the handles, that's exactly what I was saying. If I right click here, you see I've got smooth point. Smooth point is going to put some handles. Now mine happen to be out here. Let me drag this one way in here. And I can go way in here. But you don't see this until you zoom way in. You're standing back here and you're trying to delete this point, or you're trying to select that node. You click and you're not actually selecting the node. You're selecting that handle. The way to turn off those handles is, again, put the cursor over that node, right click, put the cursor over that node. Come on. See, it won't even let me select. I have to zoom in here real close because it doesn't know what it wants me to, what I'm trying to select. There we go. And you see how I have a checkpoint there? Click on smooth point. It's no longer a smooth point. It still has a handle. Let me right click to line. When you smooth a point, you're basically turning it into a Bezier. Right click to line. I'm not clicking on the point, I'm clicking on the span. So now I've just changed those to straight lines. When I zoom back out here, I have no more control handles. So you might not be working with the point. You may be working with the span to get rid of those control handles. Now, another thing you can do, and this, I don't know that I like this way, simply because it's going to change this up here as well. That is, let me come out of node editing. I've got the vector selected. We can come over here to fit curves. Now, in fit curves, we have a choice for straight lines. The only problem is if I select straight lines and then preview it, you can see what it does. It simplifies that vector, but now I got all of these up here simply because it's broken this curve into a bunch of straight line segments. I don't like that. So, and I canceled, so it did not make that change. And I can tell by going into node editing. What you can do if you really want to use that is cut the vector here, cut the vector there, then do the straight line change with curve fit, and then rejoin it. But that's several steps when all you really have to do is box select those points. Press the letter D on your keyboard and they're gone. So, and that makes for a nice clean vector. Okay. So let's see, is there a shortcut to super zoom? No. Not that I'm aware of. That would be handy. It's so slow if you need to zoom all the way in. Well, that's going to depend on the size of your material here. I'm using 12 inches by 12 inches. And all it is just zooming in with the scroll wheel on your mouse. And there is a way to back way out. And that is this center icon right here. Zoom active view to the drawing limits. Click. And that zooms you out. That's kind of a, what do they call that in zoom to the extents. So, but yeah, there's no super zoom that'll get you in there. So, let's see here. Let me make sure I haven't missed any other questions. What about shift them sideways with the left and right arrows? Yes, all of that applies, John. Just because I mentioned the up and down arrows doesn't mean that that's the only way. Let me Control Z to undo that. You can box select, and you can move them to the left. You can move them to the right. Just because I used up and down doesn't mean that that's the only limit. You can do a combination, down one, left one, down one, left one, down one, left one. You can do any combination that you'd like. So, okay. Let me look here. Brian Pomeroy wants to know, when surfacing your epoxy inlays, how exactly do you go about doing that? Do you zero off the top of the wood? And then how much do you take off? There are a couple of ways of doing this, Brian. To answer the first question, yes, I zero to the top of the wood. That's how I do it. That's how it's drawn in the software. There are a couple of ways you can do it. You can create a pocket toolpath with a cut depth of 0, so that when you set Z0, it's going to surface down to that level, and that's it. So it's not going to take off any wood. It's not going to cut down into the project. I create a pocket toolpath that is 1 inch wider than the material and 5 inches longer than the material, but it's centered on the material. And what that does is because I surface along my y-axis, my bit is 2-inch diameter. I've got the pocket is 2.5 inches longer to the rear in Y and 2 inches longer to the front in Y. So what it's going to do is it's going to make a pass, then off of the material, it'll make that X move, and then it'll come back and cut on again, make that X move off of the material, come back across the material and do it again. I create a pocket with a depth of cut is the depth of cut is 10 thousandths of an inch. And let me see what that is in millimeters. That is 1/4 of a millimeter, 0.254. That's my cut depth. Okay. So it's cutting down into the wood slightly, but not a lot. And the reason I do that is when you're doing an epoxy fill, it just kind of depends on how you poured that epoxy. Some people pour enough to where that epoxy domes up over the surface of the material. Some people don't. So when it cures, it kind of shrinks down below the surface of the material. So I find that by removing 10 thousandths of an inch, which isn't much, believe me, By removing 10 thousandths of an inch, I'm removing everything that is domed up above the surface, and I'm getting down into that area that's kind of dished down below the level of the surface. And that all comes down to how much epoxy you poured into your carved area. So my most recent epoxy pour, I ended up, and that another thing is, if 10 thousandths isn't enough, I can always run that again and take off a little bit more. So running 10 thousandths of an inch, you're not in risk of removing any detail you don't want removed until you go a little too far. But with 10 thousandths of an inch, I can usually surface twice and not worry about removing any detail. But other than that, it's just like any other surfacing job. And in fact, if you are doing an epoxy inlay on a piece of flat material, I would highly, highly, highly recommend you do two things. Number one, um, surface the material before you make your first V-carve and start pouring epoxy. Surface it flat. Okay. Second thing is, pick a space somewhere on your material. And I mean, if you have to take a pencil and draw a box around that space, do so. But make certain you don't get any epoxy in that space. And set your Z0 in that space every time. That way, you've got a clean area that's not going to be cut, that's not going to have any epoxy poured on it, that'll stay flat and level. And, if you use a touch plate, make sure it's big enough to get your touch plate on there. If you don't, make sure it's big enough that you can set your Z0 in whatever method you use. So surface the material before you make the first carve and start pouring epoxy, if it's at all possible. If you're doing an epoxy inlay on a jewelry box, for example, and it's got a finished top, you can't do that. You have to then you're just kind of stuck. But you're also not going to be surfacing epoxy off. You're going to be taking very, very good care of pouring in, just the right amount, removing as little as possible. So, yeah. Yeah. But yeah, surface your material if it's at all possible, then do your epoxy pours, but always leave an area on your material that you can come back and set your Z0 to every time. And that'll eliminate a lot of problems. So, all right, let's see here. Do we have any? And I hope that answers your question. But fair warning, epoxy projects, epoxy inlays, addictive as heck. So, let's see here. Okay. Let's see. Okay, we're talking about zoom to box. Draw a very small. Okay. You can use zoom to box and draw a very small box around the area you want to zoom into. Yes, you can. And let me see, make sure that I've got this correct. This zoom over here is zoom to the selected object. So let's say I want to select that vector. I click zoom to selected object, and it brings the center of this object into the center of my screen. This is zoom active view to the drawing limits, which zooms out so that the entire piece of material is visible. This one here, zoom 2D view to a mouse drawn box. So I'll click on this And you see I've got a magnifying glass. So if I want to zoom in on this corner, I'll draw a box. Then when I let go of my left mouse button, it zooms into that corner. And you notice my cursor has gone back to the arrow. I'm out of that utility. But yes, you've got zoom to the selected object, zoom to a mouse drawn box, and I can drag to the left or right, doesn't matter. And then I have zoom to the drawing limits. So I hope that helps. And yeah, it is pretty cool. Um, you know, would it not be simpler to zero from the bed? Some people don't have that luxury. They have aluminum beds and they don't want to carve into it. And generally speaking, when you're removing material from the top and you are not trying to machine to a specific thickness, it's better to set your Z0 from the top and cut down to a nice smooth level. So this is one of those things, Eyal, it's BMW versus Mercedes. You know what I mean? It's just your preference. Which would you rather do? But some people who have um, aluminum machine tables and don't have a spoil board in certain areas find it better just to go ahead and surface from the top. So, and I've always used this, I've always figured it this way. If you're removing material from the top, if you're cutting into the top, be it surfacing or V carving or pocketing, you're removing a specific amount of material from the surface of the material. You should set your Z0 there and machine down by that amount. If you're cutting all the way through the material and you don't want to screw up your spoil board, or if you're machining to a specific thickness, then I too set my Z0 from the machine bed. And in fact, I have a video where I show how to do that on the same project, where I'm doing a couple of things, um, where I'm machining in like a V carve or a pocket, and then I'm cutting all the way through. I show how to combine those two methods in one single file, and that's using sheets, and it works very, very well. So, zero from the bed is difficult if using tape and glue for hold downs. It can be, depending upon what your tolerances are. What am I doing here? I got a split screen. Depending on what your tolerances are, Dwayne, if you don't mind being a little bit off, so long as it cuts through the entire piece of material, I don't even bother worrying about the tape and glue. I just set it to the spoil board surface and let it cut through. You know, it the material will sit a little bit higher, so you do have to be careful. But that's what that safe Z is for. So it'll lift up above, even though the material is setting the thickness of two pieces of masking tape and however much glue you laid down. The safe Z should cover that. But yeah, it's a valid point. And if you want, I've seen some people go ahead and put 2 or 3 pieces of masking tape on their spoil board and zero to the top of that. I think that's getting a little bit nitpicky, but what can I say? I just, I'm still used to 16th of an inch builder's tolerance, Dwayne. I mean, the lines on my tape measure don't get that small. So let's see here. Um, let's see here. Pete over at Nature's Live Edge says a different surfacing technique. Toolpath cut depth 0. Set Z on work surface to 0. Reset Z to desired cut depth. That way I can make a cut depth choices at the CNC without recalculating the toolpath. Yes, if your controller will allow you to do that. Using Mach 4, I would do something similar to that, Pete. In Mach 4, it was real easy. Say I run a pass, and it took off 10 thousandths of an inch. And I decided that wasn't enough. It needs to take off a little bit more. What I could do is go over to Mach 4 and look at the height, the Z height, while it was at rest after it finished running. And let's say the Z height was 0.25, a quarter of an inch above the material. I could click on that ZDRO and type in 0.27, telling it that it was 20 thousandths of an inch higher than it actually was. Then hit enter and the DRO would read 0.27. Then I could hit cycle start. And the first thing it would do is it would drop down that 20 thousandths of an inch, go over and surface the material again. And especially when surfacing rough sawn lumber, I could take it down 20, 30 thousandths at a time until I got a nice, even, smooth finish. And it worked very well. Works very well. But not all, again, not all controllers will let you do that. I'm using Centroid Acorn, and it won't let you do that. I have to go into another screen, enter it in another blank, then apply it, and then come out of that screen and go back into my run screen, and it's made the adjustment. It won't let me just click on the DRO and change it there. I have to go into a whole other screen. It's just a pain. But every controller is a little bit different. So let's see here. We got any more questions? Try figuring out fractal resonance. Talk about tolerances. Yeah, it's above my pay grade. I'm a woodworker, man. I'm a woodworker. I don't need those tight tolerances because when I apply glue, the moisture in the glue is going to swell the wood, and all those tolerances you just calculated are right out the window. Okay, let's see. Sam Spade says, I'm doing a small colored circle inside a large circle. Both are different colors. Can I carve the small circle larger, then fill the pocket the larger, the larger circle, cutting into the smaller? Generally speaking, let me see if I still have it. I believe I do. But let me see if I have it. What I'm looking for is the pirate, because that has a lot of good examples. I do have it. Let's get it loaded up here. Generally speaking, it all comes down to a choice. When you are, oops, there we go. There is my pirate, okay? When you're designing, what you have to decide is what is the foreground and what is the background. I'll do a simple one here. We're looking at the skull in his hat, okay? This portion of the hat is the background and the skull is the foreground. So I would pour this background first, then carve the skull and crossbones into that background. That way, I'm not carving this first and hoping when I pour this epoxy, it doesn't flood over and bleed into that, which means I'd have to carve it again and then re-pour it. So basically what I'm getting at is I always pour the background first. So now in your example, where you have a small colored circle inside a larger circle, I would consider that larger circle to be the background. Unless you have a situation like down here with the beard, where the beard is going to overlap into other colors, which case I would pour these background colors first, then do the beard. So what I mean by that is if you have the larger circle is supposed to cross in front of part of that smaller circle, then I would cut the small circle first, pour it, let it cure, come back in the next day, carve the large circle, pour it, let it cure, then carry on with the design. So it just depends on what you are hoping to achieve. Okay. So let's see here. I hope that answers that. Let's see here. Whoa, okay. What bit, since it's wood and acrylic? Um, for that, I would probably default to the O flute bit if it's going to be cutting into both materials. And I'd use pretty conservative feed rates because I don't know how an O flute bit does in wood. I've never done it. But I would probably default to an O flute bit. And for those who want to know, the O stands for open. It's got a big old trench in it that's meant to evacuate those chips quickly. And the helix, meaning the twist of the bit, is not as tight as it would be, say, on a single flute or two flute spiral. And they're all upcut. There's no such thing as a downcut O flute that I've ever seen. That's not to say they don't exist, just that I've never seen one. And that is done that way on purpose. It's meant to get those acrylic chips out of there fast before they have a chance to melt and reattach to the acrylic, or weld themselves to your bit. Nature's Pete says, I'm using Centroid and it works there too. Do you have an Avid CNC? Are you using the Avid profile for CNC 12? Because that may be the difference. This is the Avid CNC profile for Centroid Acorn CNC 12. Let's see here. Okay, Ed Appleton says, was watching Scott from M&S inlay process. He does a plunge cut with a start depth of 0.25 and a final depth. Concerned about that deep in one shot. Would that work better by doing clearing first? You can do clearing. Another thing you can do is take that cut in steps. Okay. You can't edit the number of passes in a V-carve toolpath. Let me bring this up here. Okay. And we'll go back into my pirate, and you see how many toolpaths I got here. Okay. Let's see. Is there one that's just one toolpath? Yes, there is. Okay. His eyeball, the green. If I go into this V-carve toolpath, you cannot edit the number of passes. All you can do is create further toolpaths. And what I mean by that is start with, if you're going to go 1/4 of an inch deep, and the final depth. Do that in steps. The first one be 1/8 of an inch. Calculate that tool path. Then come back and do another one with a start depth of 1/8 of an inch, cutting another 1/8 of an inch. Okay, so and then calculate that tool path. So you've taken 2 steps to get that 1/4 of an inch. Now you're going to do on your third tool path, you're going to start depth of 1/4 of an inch and then add your inlay depth, your final depth. So you can take that in steps with separate tool paths. Then when it comes down, you've got all 3 tool paths calculated, you can save them to one G code. Okay. So it's going to just cut down in steps. And you can do that with the entire project if you want. So it multiplies the number of tool paths, but it gets that same end result, but taking it down in manageable bites, because not every machine will make that initial cut. Because, you're looking at cutting, if he's got a start depth of 0.25 and then a final depth that's 1/8 inch below that, he's cutting 3/8 of an inch. Your machine or your bit may not be able to do that. So you can just take it in steps. His machine could do that, and the bit he was using could handle it. So that's why he did it all in one. Um, 8 Center says, I need to get a pocket cut with precise 51.8 degree edges. Easiest way seemed to be make the STL, then import. But I forgot all the stuff you said about Z-planes and what have you. I'll need to revisit older videos again. Welcome to my world. That's one of the reasons I make videos. Half the time I can't remember what I had for dinner last night. I certainly can't remember how I created a pocket with 51.8 degree edges a year ago, one time. So that's one of the reasons I make videos. I'm not asking you to make videos. I'm not telling you to make videos. Keep copious notes. I've got a notebook out here full of stuff. I've got a notebook in there on my design computer. And when I'm drawing and designing things, I refer back to old projects all the time. I've got all my videos on an external hard drive. I can jump back to something I made 6 years ago and go, oh, that's how I did that. Okay, I remember. But yeah, nobody um, nobody remembers everything. Well, nobody who you'd want to talk to remembers everything. Let's see. Ellen says, I'm getting a roundover bit in a few days. Is it possible to refresh me as to how I run the tool? Yes, it's possible. Next question. No, we can go over that Monday evening, Ellen. As a matter of fact, that's something I've kind of been wanting to go over because it's real easy to do everything right 100% of the time. And yet when you use the roundover bit to do that roundover, you get a little edge where the tip of the bit carved in just slightly, and you can see that edge. Now, if it's an outside profile, that's fine. You can just sand that with the random orbit sander and boop, you're good. But if it's on the inside, say the inside of a dish that's about that tall, made out of end grain that you made for your wife as a catch-all tray by her computer, you'll be sanding forever because there's no way to get any kind of power tool in there to sand that edge. You got to use your thumb. Pro tip, 1 wrap of first aid tape around your thumb and your forefinger will stop you from getting blisters when you're doing a lot of sanding. The more you know. But we're going to get into that. Okay, Pete does have an avid. I'd like to talk to you about where you're doing that because I tried to do that. Click in the ZDRO and adjust there, and it wouldn't let me do it. So yeah, I'd like to talk to you about that. Brooks Martin says Ed in Scott's latest video release. This wood inlay was a nightmare. I asked him in the comments if he used two passes to get to depth, and he said yes. Yes, he does use two passes in some. Um, it depends on what it is. If he's using a 1/4 inch end mill to clear it out, maybe he'll do one pass. But if he's using an 1/8 inch end mill, he does for sure use multiple passes to get down to that depth. It's just not something that people mention in the video because not many people are interested, to be honest with you. Um, Now, there is a gentleman, and I will uh, link his channel in the comment, yeah, down in the comments. Well, down in the description as soon as we're done here. I want to make sure I get it right. It could be, I want to say it's Stephen Forsai, but it may not be. It may be somebody else. He did a video on doing deep inlays, and he demonstrates that method for taking several passes to get down to depth. I will look. I think it's Stephen Forsai, but I may be wrong. So I'll look for that, and then I'll put the link down in the. In fact, I'll put it in the comments and pin it. So, let's see here. 8th Center says, got any more interviews planned? Funny you should ask. Yes, I do have another interview. Next week, my special guest is going to be Scott Thompson from Willow Creek Studios. This man is an absolute artist in every sense of the word. He'll carve a freestanding bear, 3D carve, both sides, sitting on a log. He'll, carve that. He's also a painter. He will go in and he will paint that entire model, and it, by God, looks like a bear. He'll carve a fish swimming between two pieces of seaweed with a bunch of rocks down at a base. He will carve it out and paint it, and it looks like that fish. Scott is one hell of an artist, one hell of a 3D modeler, one hell of a carver. He'll be my special guest next week. You can look him up right now. I don't have links, but I will put a link in. His you know what? I don't know if his channel name is going by Scott Thompson or if it's Willow Creek Studios. I'll look it up and I'll put a link in that pinned comment in the comment section as soon as we're done. Okay. And now, yeah, Brooks Martin says it was Stephen Forsai. Okay. All right. And I'll get a link to his channel and I'll put it in that pinned comment. So, let's see. I've got no more questions here. So let me take a look and I will see if he goes by Scott Thompson or if he goes by Willow Creek Studios. And we will find out. He doesn't go by either. Well, there's your problem. Yep, he doesn't go by either one of them. So I'll find his channel and we'll go from there. Yes, he is. There he is. All right. Now I can give you a demonstration of what he does. This is what Scott Thompson does. Carved a bass, and then he painted that bass, and it looked like a bass. He shows how to model. He shows how to paint. He shows off his skills. And he's just an all around good guy. So Scott will be my guest next week. And while I'm here, I'll grab a copy. And there's a link to Scott's channel. So, I will also put it in a pinned comment down below. He's a heck of a nice guy. And I mean, you know, when you're looking at this kind of thing, it's wow. So, looks like we're out of questions here. So I think what I'll do is I'll go ahead and wrap this up. And Butch Miller has a question. Sometime back you mentioned using epoxy for sealing prior to painting to prevent bleed. How are you applying that? Pour or brush? Both work. The only thing that I would say is, well, it depends on the size. If you have, all right, I'm backing up 3 or 4 steps every time I open my mouth, okay? Depending upon the epoxy you use, they will give you a minimum mixture amount. Some epoxies say don't mix anything less than an ounce. So if you are pouring something and for tiny, tiny pours, I use these little 1 ounce or condiment cups. Okay. And there's a food service store nearby me. I bought 1,000 of these for about $4. I use that for teeny tiny little bitty pours. Now, just for reference, there's a thumb drive. That'll give you an idea how big this thing is and how much it pours. This does not meet the standard for minimum. I use a bathroom sized Dixie cup. If you remember the paper cups that everybody had a wall mounted dispenser in their bathroom in the 70s and 80s, that's a 1 ounce or 2 ounce cup. I use that to mix up in, and then I'll divide it up amongst several, or a couple of these, just so I can do these small pours. The epoxy I use, they say don't mix any less than, it ends up being 2 ounces, an ounce of hardener and an ounce of resin. Having said all that, um, sometimes, depending upon how big the carve is, like in my case on the pirate here, his eyeball, that was one color, and then this over here was one color, and those were the only 2 vectors that used that color. On this particular day, I had about 5 of these little son of a guns lined up with a little bit of epoxy in them. Now, thankfully, I carved these into another color, so I didn't have to worry about that. But if I had to pour them where it was going to be wood exposed, I would just go ahead and pour that, fill it with clear, then come back and carve into that clear. If it's a larger area like this entire area here, for that, epoxy is expensive. You don't want to waste it. For that, I applied with a brush. Okay. So I used the cheap craft store acid brushes, tubular handle, stiff bristles. Just make sure you get in there and pull out all the loose bristles before you do. Poured a little bit into the area that was carved out and brushed it in there. You're mainly worried about the sides, unless you're carving into end grain, in which case you're worried about all of it. So, in fact, I do brush all of it, but if it's not end grain, I pay particular attention to the sides of that pocket. So the answer is both. Um, Sometimes I'm brushing, sometimes I'm pouring, sometimes it's a combination of the two. The point is to seal the wood because it doesn't matter what bit you're using or what tool path you're using. The minute that bit touches the surface of that material, you are creating end grain. And end grain is what's going to cause all of that paint or epoxy pigment to bleed into the surrounding material. So you carve that, then you want to seal that. Some people have used shellac. I don't like to do that personally, just personal taste. Other folks use polyurethane, which is perfectly legit because um, 99% of the epoxies that we use for this kind of thing are urethane based. So there is no reaction. There's no adverse reaction. You can shoot 2-3 coats of polyurethane, then start your pouring. So if you use a brush to put clear epoxy, do you clear with an offset before doing the final pour? No, I just recarve it. Just uh, do, like, for instance, this big area here, um, that was the entire pirate, this big entire outline here. I just ran that profile again, the V carve profile again, and it worked fine. So, all right. Is there any fluid you can run through your spindle to clean out any possible buildup of oxides as a once a year kind of maintenance? Contact your spindle manufacturer. They know. I don't. I've never I've never heard of one. That doesn't mean they don't exist, just means I've never heard of it. Contact your spindle manufacturer. They may say, "Oh yeah, use this stuff." And then they may say, "Oh hell no, don't do nothing," you know. So, Alan Williamson says, I tried Brad's idea from last week, mixing water with wood glue, and it worked great for sealing. Yes, it will. It it dries fairly quickly as well. So, um, I spoke to a chemist at Franklin Industries who makes Titebond, and my question to him was, Titebond 3, um, Titebond 3 dries semi-clear, mostly clear, a lot better than Titebond 1 or 2. So I asked him, can I tint that with acrylic craft paint? And he said yes, up to 5%. And it wouldn't affect the properties of the glue. Now, I was tinting black. Black is very, very strong color. And I didn't even get close to 5% in tinting that glue black. And the glue is still holding. It's perfectly fine. I did it so I could get a little, that glue line, I wanted it to be black. So I had a little pinstripe. there where that glue line was, and it worked. Watering down tight bond to thin it out for a sealer, I believe Scott said he went about, Brad, excuse me, not Scott. Everybody I've talked to has been Scott here in the last couple of weeks, except Brad. I want to say it was about 25% water, 75% glue, just thinning it down enough to where he could, brush it on and it flowed nice and smooth. But I'll get a link to Brad's video and I'll put it in that pinned comment as well. So I wonder if a diluted glue as sealer would work prior to epoxy. No. And the reason is because that is water-based. You do not want to mix that water-based with that sealer. Believe me, it's no big deal to go ahead and cut, then brush, and then cut again. It's no big deal. That's the easiest way to do it. So, acrylic tinting wouldn't be food safe, though, would it? Sure. Probably not good on chopping boards and the like. I wasn't doing it on a chopping board. It's on it was on a fretboard on a guitar. The point is that yes, you can tint tight bond glue. That was all. Let's see here. Alan says 19% water. Then he came back and said 10%. Okay, so that's what Brad said about 10% water. Okay, cool. All right. And as far as food safety is concerned, now there are a couple of exceptions. Almost all finishes are food safe once they reach maximum cure. Okay. Now, tinting with acrylic craft paint, I wouldn't do it on a cutting board, but you also have to look at your level of risk. Everybody's different. How much acrylic craft paint are you going to get from that cutting board in the worst case scenario? Not enough to do you any harm. We eat every component of that acrylic craft paint every day of our lives, just by virtue of being alive. So I don't sweat the small things. However, I'm not in production. I don't make things for people and sell them. I also don't use things like that on something that's going to be used on food. I wouldn't do it on a cutting board. I wouldn't tint it. Unless you find a food safe tint, in which case, tint on, my friend. My question to him was, can I do that? And it was for a guitar fretboard. It was a maple fretboard going on a maple neck. And I thought, you know what, if I can tint this glue, I might get a little black line right there. It did work. So, but also you got to remember that you're clamping things up. So your clamping needs to be nice and even. Otherwise you get a line that looks like that. And it's going to squeeze most of that glue out. So very, very subtle little line there. And it's like, how'd you do that? It's another ancient secret that I just made up. Anyway, the big question, how were the ribs last night? Gone. That's how they were. They were excellent. Let's see. Butch Miller says, as a Marine, I've eaten enough dirt and stuff out in the field. Nothing can hurt me now. Well, speaking as an Army soldier, as a Marine, you've probably eaten so many crayons. The insides are coated with wax, which left a protective, shiny layer. So you're all right. Let's see here. Army's got to pick on Marines, man. There. There's the other person that helped me destroy a rack of ribs last night. All right. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. As I mentioned earlier, next week, the one and only Scott Thompson, we're going to get into your questions, but we're going to get into his answers specifically. I want to talk to him about painting. I want to talk to him about his design inspirations. I want to talk to him about his artistic journey and his CNC journey. So I will put a link to Scott's YouTube channel in a pinned comment down here below as soon as we're done live. I cordially invite you to go over and binge watch his channel. That way you will be loaded for bear with lots of questions for Scott. He's a real decent guy, and I'm just grateful to him for agreeing to sit in the hot seat for a little bit and talk about his design inspiration. I've got my list made of the links that I got to find, and I will get those done here as soon as possible. Again, they'll be in a pinned comment uh, after we're done live here. Tomorrow night, members, it's going to be cribbage board madness again. This time we're not going to play around. We're going to design a cribbage board. I'm going to be relying heavily on some folks who have made cribbage boards in the past, because we're going to design one just based on whatever you guys want to make the design all the way through. And we'll go from there. And that's again tomorrow night at 5:30 p.m. Pacific, 8:30 p.m. Eastern. Look at the membership/community tab and you'll find the link there. I posted it up yesterday. If you don't know what I'm talking about, or you'd like information on how to become a channel member and get these additional live streams, early access to my videos, membership in the super secret Facebook group, and the even super secreter, if that's a word, which it isn't, but it is now because I said it, Facebook live chat. Right below this video panel, you see the word join. Click on that word join. Another panel is going to pop up. The video is going to play to tell you all about channel membership. We got a great group of people, and I'd love to add you to that group. I talk about it quite a bit. I am seriously blessed that this group of people has assembled itself and allowed me to be a part of it. I mean, these people have hearts of gold. You wouldn't believe what goes on behind the scenes, the generosity in these people and the level of help. I mean, yep, there you go. Kurt says it best. The membership is worth it. There are no egos getting in the way. Everyone makes each other successful. We're all about that. We're all about making each other better than we were yesterday. And we also have a lot of fun. We talk a lot of barbecue. Anyway, click that join button. Panel's going to pop up. Video's going to play. Tell you all about channel membership. For everybody else, next Sunday, Scott Thompson from Willow Creek Studio. One heck of a guy. Have your questions ready. He's on the ball. He knows what he's talking about. Other than that, get your shingles vaccine if you are 50 years old or older and you have had the chicken pox. Trust me, I am in day 31 of a minimum of 90. You don't want this. You don't want this. I'm telling you. So, with all that said, I'll say thank you for spending part of your Sunday with me. And I will see the channel members tomorrow. Everyone else, I'll see you next week. Have a great rest of your Sunday. Y'all take care.